depending on where you are watching us from. Today we want to look at how do you start teaching your preteen sex education? What can you do? Where do you start? And so we need to start from first explaining what sex education is to the preteen. What is sex education? So that means that as a caregiver, as a parent, you need to be prepared. You don't just come to explain a subject you don't know the topic. So first, get yourself acquainted with what sex education is. So explain to the child what sex education is. Let the child know that it is an education that helps him to understand his sexuality. Okay? And it is a topic that will help the child to build himself or herself over the period of time about what is going on in his or her body. So start from explaining what is sex education. After you've explained to the child what sex education is, explain to the child what sexuality is. Explain what sex education is and explain what sexuality is. After you've explained these two concepts to the child, ask the child, what do you understand by sex education and what do you understand by sexuality? Then listen attentively. As the child explains, ask the child, before now, do you have any knowledge about sex education? Have you heard of it? Have you any experience or have people talked about it in your present? What do you know about sex education? Now you listen to the child. As the child explains his or her view to you, pay attention. Then, after the child have explained, ask the child any question you have. If you don't have any question, ask the child if the child have any question. Now, if the child have any question, you answer. Answer honestly and frankly from your mind. Don't lie to the child. And this body part you want to explain, remember the last time we discussed how to explain sex education to a 0 to 2, 3, 4 years old child. Start by telling them their body parts. Now, right now, the child already know his or her body parts. Now, let the child, as you explain to the child, use the biological name for this body part. Don't use nickname as we say before. Now, when you don't use nickname and you've explained this, the child is listening. Okay? Then map out other topics about sexuality, like sexual development. We have different sexual development that goes on in a child's body. Talk about, you can break them down to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. Follow us on this channel. We'll break that down for you. Developmental stages, sexual developmental stages of a child. Now, after you've broken it down to these different stages for the child, tell the child what stage 1 is, what stage 2 is, what stage 3 is. After you've explained to the child, listen as the child asks his or her question. Listen as the child asks his or her question. Now, answer the child's question. Then another thing is, remember that at every age, there is adequate information you can dish out. Now, make sure that you break these topics down to the level of the child. Now, when you break it down to the level of the child and know the adequate information the child can comprehend at that age, stop at that. Tell the child that there is many more to learn in the future, but this is the least you can comprehend right now. Don't worry, there are still rooms for other discussion on this topic. Okay? Then, remember that sex education is not just a one-day discussion. It's not a one-day-off discussion. It's going to be a discussion that will always reoccur. You can make out a timetable for this. You can discuss this issue twice a week, 3 times a week, as often as you can, when the discussion come up or when you see things that prompt such discussion, but make it a future. Why we are saying this is because a lot of young ones do not have knowledge of sex education. So they're ignorant of things that happen in their body and things that may put them in trouble. Now, after that, you've made out time for this discussion. Make sure you have something like a curriculum, topics you want to discuss with them at every stage of their life. So for a preteen, where do you start? Start from explaining what sex education is. Start from explaining sexuality to them. Start from explaining the developmental stages of sexuality. That will help them to pick up. And as you go further, you put out you give out other topics. We'll talk about these other topics in our subsequent edition. I want this video to be as short as possible. Start from this if you have preteen. Tell them what sex education is. Tell them what sexuality is. Explain the different stages of sexuality. That means you need to be equipped. What are the different stages of sexual development? Or what are the developmental stages that happen in a child? We'll talk about that in our next episode. But please, as a caregiver, have time for your children so you can teach them sex education. This will be it for today on our sex education section. Where do you start teaching your preteen sex education? I've itemized 3 things you can start doing. I'll see you in our next topic.